Posting journal totals to the general ledger. The summarized journal information that you've already created for the month is now going to need to be sent to the ledger accounts in the correct places. Remember that for every entry there's always a debit and a credit, so that is what we're going to do. However, you won't see it immediately because the journal has summarized all the information. What we're going to do is post the totals of each column in the journal to the relevant account in the general ledger. All you need to do is look at the total column and look at the heading at the top of that column. That is where the total will need to go to. When you're deciding which side of the account to put it on, in other words, to debit or to credit it, try to visualize the transaction, to imagine what is actually happening to that account. For example, in the cash receipts journal, if you're looking at the bank column, imagine cash receipts. Money is coming into the business for whatever it might be. It might have been for sales or somebody's paying you for something else. You can visualize the money coming across the counter and going into the till and being taken to the bank account. Therefore, obviously, the bank account is increasing because money is being received. And because bank is an asset, you would show it on the debit side. In your actual general ledger accounts, you would already have opened the accounts with the given balances and used your knowledge of which accounts should be debited and which should be credited when they're increasing and decreasing, that you would already see that if the account is increasing for bank, you need to debit it. When you're trying to enter the entry, first put the amount in. Although the amount is really the last part of the entry if you're working from left to right, in reality it's much easier to put the amount first to anchor the entry. The reason for this is that you see the amount, you're thinking about the amount while it's fresh in your mind, plop it in on whichever side it needs to go. Then you don't need to go and think again later about what was the amount or is it debit or credit. You've already got it. Once you've got that, then it's easy enough to go and add in the other information like the date and the details and the folio. For the details, sometimes you forget what you need to write here. It's very simple. It is always the name of the other account or accounts involved in that transaction. So if you're thinking of the bank column of the cash receipts journal, interestingly, all of those amounts went into a variety of other places. It might have been sales, current income, entries in the sundry column for rent income, etc. And so because there are a lot of accounts involved, you can say sundry accounts. Sundry just means other bits and pieces, where you're too lazy to write out sales and current income and rent income and capital, etc. Folio references are used in the general ledger to create the audit trail. We've already spoken about this when we were doing the journals, and you'll see it when you enter it into the general ledger now. There is a folio column, and in that column you will simply say which journal the information came from, so that if you need to check it, it's easy to go back and find the original entry. It's very important that when you are posting to your ledger, you work methodically, column by column. So work through, for example, the cash receipts journal, post the bank column, then post sales, then post current income, etc., and then go on to the cash payments journal. For example, let's do example 9.3. Now, in this case, you'll notice that instead of just doing the columns first, because there's an entry in sundry accounts and I want to do things in date order, I'm actually going to post my sundry entries first because I can see exactly what day this happened on and I need to post it on that day. So I will post all my sundry entries and then I will post all my totals at the end of the month. Over here you can see there's an amount of 1,500 that needs to be posted, and my details here is telling me it has to go to the rent income account. So I find my rent income account. I can already see that naturally I would want to put it on the credit side. It's probably a good idea just to think about what's happening, visualize the transaction. If you're in the cash receipts journals for rent income, your tenant walked in and paid you the money. In other words, you are getting more money for the rent and your owner's equity is increasing. And so, yes, it will need to go on the credit side. Enter your 1,500 in the amount column first, then go into the other things. You're going to use the day 28 because that is the actual day that the transaction took place on. And you know that because it is a single sundry entry, so you can put the date that it happened. When we post these totals over here, you'll see we'll do it on the last day of the month. The other account involved, have a look. This is a nice, clever trick that you can use. You can see the amount here is 1,500. Remember, when we were entering the information into the journal, we always put the number into two columns because two accounts were involved. Go and have a look and see what other column is that 1,500 in. If you go backwards, there's 9,800. In fact, that one is simply adding your analysis and depositing into bank. We can ignore it. We don't need it. But can you see over here, there's 1,500. And although it's an analysis of receipts, remember that is the crutch for bank. It's helping you work out what your deposits into bank were. So that 1,500 is actually hiding inside here. Your other account is bank. And so therefore, in the details in the ledger, you will write bank. To determine the journal entry, you can just go and have a look at the top here, and you can see it says CRJ3. In other words, it was the third page of the cash receipts journal, so you write CRJ3 as your folio reference. Now, the last thing you need to do, just to remind yourself that you have actually posted it, and if you're looking in the journal to see where it went, is over here. You write the folio, in this case, I2. That I2 comes from the heading rent income. You would have a folio number here. It's often with a letter N for nominal accounts. I've used the letter I for income. You could use it however you want. Sometimes people just use a number and not even a letter with it. But whatever the reference is that's over here, you will need to insert over there to show that you have posted it to account I2 in the journal. Now we can start posting the column totals. Over here, the first column we need to post is bank. Notice that I'm not going to worry about analysis of receipts because it doesn't actually have a total. And remember, that was because we transferred the amounts across to the bank column as we deposited the money into the bank account. So this 21,300 is the first amount that we need to post. You're in the cash receipts journal, so you must be receiving money, so bank must be increasing. You go to your bank account. You can already see increasing must be on the debit side. So you anchor the entry by putting 21,300 on the debit side. The date in this case is the 31st because it's a total. You want to use the last date of July. July has 31 days. The folio reference is the other easy one to put in, CRJ3, because you can see it at the top there. The details is the name of the other account, but if you look at all of these entries in the bank account, you can see that they're in a variety of places. They're either in current income, but they're also in rent income. Over here, you could have said current income and rent income, but you probably don't want to write out that much, and therefore you are allowed to cheat a little bit and just call it sundry accounts, which means a bunch of other stuff. The next column is the current income. You can imagine that you are earning the income from your customers over here, and therefore your equity is getting bigger. So that 19,800 Rand needs to be credited because you are increasing your equity in the current income account. Again, the day is the 31st because it's a total at the end of the month. Folio is still CRJ3. The details, remember, is the name of the other account involved. Look at all of these current income entries. Can you see that each and every one of them appeared in bank? And so therefore bank is your other account involved. Another way to remember this is quite simply, obviously for bank, there's a bunch of other accounts. So you would write sundry accounts, and for everything else, in this case, current income and rent income, the contra account is bank in both cases because that's where the amount also went. Posting the cash payments journal, there weren't any sundry accounts, so we don't need to worry about doing them first. In this case, your bank is getting smaller because it's a cash payments journal. You are spending money. And so therefore, you are going to work on the credit side of your bank account because your asset is getting smaller. So we put the 10,200 on the credit side. We need to put the date, the 31st, and because we didn't have another entry above it, we need to write out the year and the month also, in this case, 2012 July. We put the folio reference, CPJ3, you can get that from the top of the journal over there. And then just like in the cash receipts journal, all of these amounts appeared in lots of other columns. You could write material costs and stationery and wages over here, but you're probably a bit too lazy and therefore you can say sundry accounts. Material costs, the total is going to be 7,600, which will need to go to the material costs account. It is an owner's equity expense, and because it's an expense, it's making equity smaller. So the more money we spend on material costs, the less equity we actually have. And so therefore, we're going to need to work on the debit side of material costs. You can see we already had the balance there, so it's quite easy to just carry on working below that. Put the amount of 7,600, your day 31, folio CPJ 3. The name of the other account involved, where else can you see the 5,000 and the 2,600? Oh, look, 5,000 is in bank. Now, if you get confused here, you can see bank is 2,800, but it's only 2,600 here. But that's because there was also stationery. This 2,600 is hiding inside that 2,800. So for both of these amounts, the other account was bank, and therefore bank is going to be your details. Remember, for each of these, as you post, put your folio references. A2 for bank, E1 for material costs. Stationery, 600 Rand needs to be posted. You can see both of those amounts are hiding in bank. So 600 Rand in the amount column. The details will be bank on the 31st, folio reference CPJ3. And remember to then take that E2 and put it next to your total over here so that you can see you've done it. The last one is your wages, 2,000. Again, also an expense will decrease your equity, so you put it on the debit side, and you're going to show your date. You're going to have to put the year and the month because it's the first entry you've got for this account on the 31st. Details bank because that's where the 2,000 Rand was. It was in the bank column. So you write bank, CPJ3 2000. And you give it a folio number, E3, because you've had to create this account. It wasn't here. You didn't have an opening balance for it. So you needed to make a new one. That's fine. It doesn't have to have an opening balance. It just means that this is the first time you've actually employed somebody and had to pay them wages. Maybe you just kept the business very small and were doing everything yourself up until now, but now you're going to employ somebody and you need to pay them wages. And then you would show the E3 over there. You can now go and do exercise 9.4 on your own to see if you understand.